We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Tuesday, August 19th, here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Brooke Prince.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, and also Niles with us.
Good morning.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's Tuesday, which means we're going to begin with our keyword news, where we look at a story that has been gaining traction over the past 24 hours. And today's keyword is wage gap. The share of young women earning over 3 million won, or around $2,000 in their first job, was found to be only about 1/3 that of men in South Korea. According to Statistics Korea on Monday, as of May this year, 10.5% of men aged 15 to 29 earned more than 3 million won in their first job. But the proportion of women earning this amount in their first job was only 3.3%. An official from Statistics Korea said the difference was mainly driven by the wage gaps across industries where young men and women tend to find their first jobs. Compared to last year, more men entered scientific and technical services, fields that generally pay higher wages, while more women entered the public administration and social security sectors, which typically offer lower pay. So Niall, how could policymakers or companies address these disparities for young women entering the workforce, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to this, and the first one is the equal pay aspect of it, and then the second being women in male-dominated fields. And when it comes to policy, I think we can strengthen equal pay laws by enforcing transparency in starting salaries, whether it be for male or female employees. And the second factor is probably also the fact that there are just not as many women in these fields to claim the equal pay to start with. So we can start by creating scholarships, internships, and training programs, and actively encourage young women to enter tech, engineering, and science jobs, and provide guidance that challenges gender stereotypes early on in their lives, so young women see broader options and beyond just traditional fields.
So in your personal opinion, do you think it'd be more effective to focus on raising wage levels in those industries or the lower paying industries? Or do you think it's better to expand access for young women in these higher paying fields like you mentioned?
I think both. I think that it needs to go hand in hand, obviously, for better quality of life for everyone, but encouraging women to be able to choose whatever they want to in those fields is just key to empowering women.
So what are your thoughts on these?
Well, of course, I think seeing any kind of wage gap is disheartening. I myself have experienced it in this industry. I was cast in something and my male co-star actually got more than me by a factor of 10.
That's crazy.
And it wasn't like he was, a household name or had a bigger role than me. He just told me, well, I said I wouldn't accept it for anything less. And that would kind of blew my mind. I think a man saying something like that, they're seen as strong and assertive, but a woman in society might be seen as demanding, bossy, or unreasonable. And so, it inspired me to stand up for myself more. And I think that one of the biggest problems here is also that across industries we don't see similar wages. And as someone in a creative field, it kind of hurts my heart a bit that we're not as respected as more, scientific or technical fields. My dad always had this joke growing up. He would say, Brooke, I'm open in terms of your career. You can be any kind of doctor you want. And, it's a joke, of course, but it reflects a broader view, I think, of those fields being seen as sort of higher than other fields that do attract more women because they're more creative fields. So I would like to see a reduced wage gap in all fields across all industries and empower people to go after their passions.
Yeah.
What you said kind of reminds me of the Taylor Swift song, The Man.
Yeah.
When a man says something, it's assertive, but when a woman, she's kind of, regarded as demanding.
Right, there's like a negative connotation, so I think we gotta fix that.
So the data makes it clear that significant challenges remain for young women entering the workforce, but with more awareness, evolving workplace policies, and increasing opportunities in higher paying industries, the next generation has potential to bridge this gap and create a fairer, hopefully more equal workforce. And that concludes our keyword news for this Tuesday. And as we head into the second day of the work week, we're diving into the trend of studying and working outside the home, a habit that's becoming increasingly popular among millennials and Gen Zs. So let's take a look at the screen to learn more.
Most of us have probably studied or worked at cafes before. Not only is it a change of scenery, but it's also often easier to concentrate, stay motivated, and even be more productive outside the home or office. However, there has been a growing controversy over people who cross the line by bringing bulky items like printers or desktop computers, taking up space for long periods. In response, a major coffee chain has begun to crack down on these practices, sparking debate among customers, especially millennials and Gen Z, about the role of cafes as work and study spaces. So today on News Generation, we'll take a closer look at this issue, the controversy it sparked, and the conversation around it as we explore what it reveals about the changing culture of work and study.
As we just saw, studying and working at cafes has become a common habit, particularly among millennials and Gen Zs. Many of them see cafes as more than just a place to grab coffee. They view them as a comfortable and convenient alternative to studying at home or in a library. But Starbucks recently announced a new policy that items like desktop computers, printers, and power strips are now prohibited, and any seat left unattended for more than 30 minutes will be cleared. Niall, can you tell us more about this decision, how millennials and Gen Zs are reacting to this new policy?
Right, many millennials and Gen Z, including myself, were shocked to learn that some people actually do bring their desktops and printers to cafes and leave them unattended for long periods of time. Yes, we live in Korea, but this is a bit much. And I was personally very shocked because I've also studied at cafes and worked in cafes as well. But this is obviously those few cases that have seriously crossed some lines. But it is very eye-opening indeed what some people think is okay. And these few cases, they will actually ruin it for the rest of us because Starbucks, while known to be very generous to their customers when it comes to their policies, it's impacting their business, so they are making changes. And they said, Starbucks is saying that this rule was introduced to increase available seats, and it makes sense for their business. And Starbucks used to be the place to be for 가공족, or in Korean, or cafe studiers. When Starbucks starts to enforce these rules, other cafes will start to follow the big chains and gradually strengthen their own regulations.
But there are, at the same time, actually cafe chains are actively embracing long-stay customers, seeing as a chance to actually innovate and stand out in this kind of crowded market. So one cafe, for example, has introduced dedicated study zones, while another has launched a smart office. So they basically have bar-style seating with laptop stations, and they also have small group seating. And still another cafe has gone even further and opened a study cafe-style lounge with hourly passes, and they offer a free snack bar. And even there's a budget brand that's famous in Korea, and what they have done is they have set aside designated seating for people that come there to study. So with basically price competition alone proving unsustainable, it looks like these cafes, there's still some cafes that are leaning into the trend and turning to longer stay services as a way to kind of differentiate themselves and attract customers. So it's kind of interesting to see how this trend is evolving. And there are a lot of millennials and Gen Zs as such, and the reason why they're doing this is because there's so many young people using cafes as a place to study and work. So what's driving this trend in the first place, Brooke?
That's right. It's very interesting to see how things have changed. And let's look at the numbers here. Survey data shows roughly 7 in 10 Gen Z job seekers study in cafes at least once a week. If you take a look at this graphic, you can see the specifics here. So we have 70% of respondents saying that they use a cafe to study once a week or more, while 27% said they go less than once per week, and just 3% said that they never do so, which is quite a small number. And personally, I also studied often in cafes when I was in graduate school because it kind of gave me a chance to get out of the house, right? My first year, it was during COVID, so we had remote classes. And so it was nice once we were allowed to go back to campus to go to cafes and get some sort of human interaction, even if it was indirectly. Plus, when you're at home, it's so so easy to lose focus, right? I have a pet at home. I love to play with him. You have your TV at home, your phone. Maybe you've got chores around the house that you need to get done. But at a cafe, you're there for a reason. You have told yourself you're going to go there to study. And if other people around you are also studying, it can inspire you to stay on task. Many young people also cite the pleasant environment as a reason why they study in cafes. You have very comfortable seating. You can order delicious food, drinks. You've got stable Wi-Fi. And one of the most important things during this heat wave, air conditioning. You have the nice, brisk air conditioning so you can study comfortably. And for me, one thing I really like is that steady sort of cafe white noise. You've got people bustling around and chatting. And for me, that helps me to get things done. Other people, it might be different, but some people really like that background noise. And I just think for the MZ generation, cafes feel less rigid, right? If you tell yourself, I'm going to go to the library to study, you already don't want to go. It's like saying, I want to go to the gym to exercise. You'd rather just go on a walk and you happen to get exercise. So if you go to the cafe, it feels like you're doing something hip, trendy, and fun for yourself, and then you happen to study on the side. I think that gives people a lot more incentive.
So as someone who has studied at cafes, like you said, during grad school, do you see businesses like leaning towards this trend or pushing against it?
Well, with all of the things you said about the policies they've enacted and new corners where you can study and things like that, I actually think they are embracing it because they can tell 70% of young people are using cafes for this reason. So you might as well turn it into a business opportunity, right?
But the tension between cafe goers and business owners isn't exactly a new issue, is it? So how has this conflict kind of evolved across time, Niall?
Right. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but the issue isn't just about studying in cafes. Like you mentioned, that they know that people do this. And it's when someone buys that one drink and occupies a large table for hours and hours at a time, or even complains that other customers are being too loud for them to study. And now some cafe owners have responded by restricting the outlet usage for their computers or whatever other gears that they have, and imposing extra charges for stays longer than 2 hours to buy extra drinks, or introducing the study room rentals with stricter seating rules, as Sujin just mentioned. And they made this decision for their business. And in some ways, it may seem harsh to ask somebody to continue to buy drinks, but I think it's all these cases that were too extreme that forced them to do that, and I don't blame them.
So it's clear that the debate over studying or working cafes isn't going away anytime soon. Some see it as a natural part of modern life, but others argue it places an unfair burden on businesses and disrupts the atmosphere for other customers. So to get a better sense of where people stand on this issue, we conducted a poll on the Arirang뉴스 YouTube channel asking, what do you think about studying or working at a cafe for a long time? So about 20% of respondents said it's perfectly fine to study or work in cafes, while the majority, 68%, felt it's acceptable only if customers continue to place orders. Meanwhile, 12% believed it ruins the overall atmosphere of the cafe. So since opinions on this topic seem pretty divided, we thought it'd be fun to turn it into a little OX quiz. So we're going to talk about what's acceptable when it comes to using cafe and what might actually be considered bad etiquette. So I have here 2 paddles, and I'm going to give one to each of you guys.
Thank you.
And so the first question here is it okay to go to cafes to use their power outlets? So Brooke, do you want to go first?
I would say yes, with a caveat. If you are working or studying and your phone runs low or your laptop runs low, I think it's okay to charge it. But the key, and we keep repeating this today, the key is don't go overboard. Do not cross the line. Avoid using too many power strips, multiple chargers. Don't block outlets so other people can use them. And of course, if you're going to stay for hours on end, consider buying another drink. You should also make sure that your cables aren't going to trip anyone, and really pack lightly. It shouldn't look like a makeshift office in the middle of a cafe. Just be considerate. That's it.
I think I agree with Brooke. I mean, charging your phone or maybe even your laptop while you're working, some cafes even offer that outlet in certain seats, so they're okay with you doing that. But if you are bringing your desktop and printers and setting up an entire office space there, maybe it's not right to do that.
So I really think it depends on how far you go and like how much time you're actually spending there. So the second question I have for both of you is it all right to ask people around you to keep it down? Brooke, again, going on first.
I don't think so. You're going to a cafe, so you have to expect there's going to be some noise. They're not libraries, they're social spaces. And of course, there are exceptions. I myself frequent PC bongs more than cafes, and those are very loud environments. You've got people screaming at their computers sometimes. But even then, you can go too far. I've seen staff intervene if someone is playing their music too loudly or being overly disruptive. And similarly, I think if you're in a cafe and someone is being that loud that it's disrupting the entire place, then yes, you can ask them to keep it down or ask a staff member if you're uncomfortable. But in general, if people are just laughing and having fun, let them. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, I think I agree, but in a certain way. But when they're so loud to a point, maybe beyond how much we're talking right now, the louder than this level, and they're being so loud and disruptive to other people who are there to talk as well, not just to study. I think that's a level when you can ask maybe the cafe owners to intervene a bit. Maybe don't go up to them directly. But when it comes to you studying at a cafe, please just go to the library. And you can't tell other people to be quiet if you're there to study, because you just all have different reasons of being there, and you can't enforce that on somebody else.
Right, like you say, as long as someone's not screaming, and you're there for the lively atmosphere, technically. And if you're there just to study, if you want to concentrate, like there's also study cafes in Korea, that people can frequent. So, and lastly, what about holding your spot while you step out for a while? Do you think that's okay, or is that also crossing the line?
I would say as an American, I'm still, even after 10 years living here, I'm not comfortable leaving my valuables, even though I know it's Korea, they're probably going to be fine. I feel uncomfortable, and I also feel guilty because technically my stuff is sitting in my seat. That's not a person. And so you are taking up that ability for the owner to get money, essentially. And I actually think we mentioned earlier that there's a policy for 30 minutes, that grace period. That is so generous. Some people just go to a cafe for 30 minutes at all. So if you can leave for 30 minutes, to me that seems like almost too much. I would say keep it brief. If you need to go to the bathroom and come back, that's fine. But if you're going to leave for an hour, you should take your stuff with you and come back later.
I agree. What about you?
I mean, I think there's a reason why they set it up as 30 minutes. Like you said, it's very gracious. But if it's for a few minutes, you're stepping out, going to the bathroom, you do so. It's fine. But if you're going out for a meal with your friend in the middle and then coming back to resume your work that you've been doing for a few hours prior to that, just maybe place your hand on your heart and ask yourself, did I really pay enough to buy this entire seat for the day? Probably not. So I think there's a discretion that's necessary there.
Like Brooke said, there could be a cultural element at play as well. So to get a more global perspective on this issue, we'll be speaking with someone who's currently working overseas. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Alexandra, a young person who's currently working in the fashion industry in Australia. So hi, Alexandra. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So is it common in Australia for people to study or work in cafes? And what about you personally? Do you also do this?
Yes, we have a very big cafe culture in Australia, particularly the big cities like Melbourne, which is famous for its coffee. We love to bring our laptops, bring some headphones and sit and just work or study for a couple of hours. And it's a very big part of our culture. But there are a few unspoken rules that you should follow if you want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's great to have you back on the show again. My question for you is, are there any conflicts or controversies between cafe owners and customers who use cafes for studying or working in your country, kind of for going against those unspoken rules you mentioned?
Well, yeah, I worked at Starbucks for a couple of years, so I saw a lot of people coming in with their laptops and working for hours on end, and they wouldn't buy more than one drink. So it does tend to teeter into a bit of a rude territory. I agree that if you're going to sit there and stay for a few hours, you should buy more than one drink, maybe some food. But yeah, we haven't really seen anybody bring a big computer or a printer into the cafe. But if they did that, they would definitely get a few funny looks, especially from the owners, because that's not something that's very accepted in cafes.
I think they got a few funny looks here in Korea as well. But in your opinion, what do you think would be a smart way to manage these kinds of conflicts?
Yeah, I think the idea really just comes down to respect. So paying respect to the cafe owners, to the people around you, and also to yourself, because it does reflect poorly on you if you are the only person playing music or sitting there for 5 hours or screaming and talking with friends and not doing any work, or, as you say, leaving for an hour with all of your stuff at the table. This is very disrespectful. So if you make sure that you are quiet, you pay for a couple of drinks or some food, you sit there with just a laptop, just your headphones. If you need to use some power outlets, again, just be polite and ask before you start grabbing things, and then you'll be fine. It doesn't matter if you want to sit there for a few hours. Libraries sometimes don't accept food or drinks, so it might not always be the best option. And so that's why cafes have sort of adapted to that culture here. But you really do have to be nice about it. It is a business after all, and it is a public place. It's not your house. So treat it like that.
That's a good reminder. All right, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
So we just heard from a young person from Australia sharing her perspective on how people there study and work outside the home and how they navigate this cafe kind of culture we see here. And there's also challenges and expectations of public spaces, both in Korea and apparently in Australia as well. So Brooke, how do you think conflicts with people who use cafes as study or workspaces can be resolved? What kinds of solutions could strike a balance between the needs of regular customers, business owners, and those who rely on these spaces for long periods of work or study?
Well, I think it's like you just said, it's about striking a balance. I think Alexandra also put it well. It's about respect. You have to respect each other. It is not your home, but think of it like paying bills for your utility bills, for example. If you're using their electricity, then buying a drink or buying food, that's your way of contributing to what they are going to have to pay for the resources that you are using. It is not for free. And now we see more and more cafes, they are publishing rules like prohibiting bulky office gear, like the printers we kept talking about, limiting, longer stays, and discouraging things like Zoom calls or something where your speakers are going to be really loud, because of course that can disturb people. But I think as customers, we can meet business owners halfway. We can come in with a smaller setup. We can avoid using video calls. We can use our headphones instead, and we can keep ordering if we're planning to stay for a long time. We've mentioned it a few times now. I think owners can offer maybe quieter corners, study places that are specifically designed for people that are looking for kind of a quieter atmosphere, and they should just clearly indicate their policies on the menus and the walls so that everyone knows what to expect. But I would say, with 7 in 10 Gen Zers that are using cafes for this purpose, there's no reason to prohibit it entirely. We can still have this. We don't have to ruin nice things, right? We just need to do a little tweaking to make sure that both sides are getting a fair shake.
Just so briefly, do you have any other suggestions?
I think this is a flip on how we think about things, but maybe libraries should have better cafes in their first floors, and people would come and we can bring in young people back to libraries.
Great idea.
And, local governments can make revenues off of this and it'll help as well. But you know what? Overall, coming back to cafes, they need to have clear guidance and really enforce it. And we need to not punish them for enforcing that. And we should all have a mutual understanding of what respect and disrespect is.
So while the rise of cafe workers and students has sparked debate, some worry about long stays or bringing bulky items like printers. Cafes and customers are slowly starting to find ways to coexist. So opinions still differ on what should be allowed, but by being mindful of others, keeping setups simple, and respecting shared spaces, everyone can enjoy the benefits of these adaptable environments. And in the end, cafes can be places where comfort, productivity, and community come together. But before that happens, it's important to remember that both owners and visitors must consider each other's needs. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. A big thanks to Brooke.
Thank you for having me.
And Niall.
No problem.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching, and we hope you have the best day. We are
News Generation.